cool. All right, so let me go ahead and get started. Today, we'll be talking about global citizenship, what it means, what global citizenship education can look like, how it's been defined by different national and international bodies and organizations. The idea of global local connections in the classroom and pedagogies around that, including different ideas for practices of experiential and action-based educations. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers about what this could mean for us, what it could mean for classrooms in Maringá. All right, so why does global citizenship matter? Citizenship education has traditionally been associated with ideas of civic education, so teaching national government systems and civic actions such as voting, what we normally think of as what it means to be a citizen. Carlos Alberto Torres wrote that civic education really, in the traditional sense, involves three categories: civic knowledge, such as the basic concepts and practices of democracy and civil society; civic skills, which include how to facilitate, citizenship judgment and actions; and then civic virtues, which are usually defined in a Western cultural sense as discipline, compassion, civility, tolerance, respect, etc. So what this idea of global citizenship is questioning is, how did the realities of globalization in 21st century existence, our lives, change these conceptions of citizenship education? And is it even possible, Torres asks, to try to build a global citizenship education when so many nations have failed to build national citizenship educations? For those of you who might have had Tara and I in class and asked about the US education system, this is not something, civic education, that most people spend time in learning at school. And if they do, it's usually pretty basic, pretty small. So one of the first bodies to try to define this idea of global citizenship and level up citizenship education for the 21st century is, of course, the United Nations. They define global citizenship as the umbrella term for social, political, environmental, and economic actions of globally minded individuals and communities on a worldwide scale. The term can refer to the belief that individuals are members of multiple, diverse, local and non-local networks, rather than single actors affecting isolated societies. Promoting global citizenship in sustainable development will allow individuals to embrace their social responsibility to act for the benefit of all societies, not just their own. They write, furthermore, the concept of global citizenship, of course, is embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals, especially in SDG 4, which is ensuring inclusive and quality education for all, and promoting lifelong learning, which includes global citizenship as one of its targets. So under the Sustainable Development Goals, if folks are familiar, by 2030, the international community has agreed to ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including global citizenship. This includes universities, which have a responsibility to promote global citizenship by teaching their students that they are members of a large global community and can use their skills and education to contribute to that community. Are we looking at my next slide? Oh, no, sorry about that. UNESCO really took the initiative of defining global citizenship education after the UN Secretary outlined global citizenship as a very important practice from a document called the GIFI in 2012, because the GIFI outlined 3 basic principles: access, quality, and promoting global citizenship as important for international education. And then this GIFI initiative framework was adopted by UNESCO, who took the responsibility of translating global citizenship into global citizenship education. UNESCO writes, while the world may be increasingly interconnected, human rights violations, inequality, and poverty still threatened peace and stability. Global citizenship education is UNESCO's response to these challenges. It works by empowering learners of all ages to understand that these are global, not local issues, and to become active promoters of more peaceful, tolerant, inclusive, and secure and sustainable societies. So for UNESCO, global citizenship education is based on 3 domains of learning: cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral, whereas cognitive is knowledge and thinking skills necessary to better understand the world and its complexities. Socio-emotional learning domain includes values, attitudes, and social skills that enable learners to develop effectively psychosocially and physically, and to enable them to live together with others respectfully and peacefully. And the behavioral learning domain includes conduct, performance, and practical application and engagement. To give another example, Oxfam International, which is a British consortium of charities, they have a very highly cited definition, which is that global citizenship education includes critical thinking, equipping young people with the knowledge, skills, and values to participate as active citizens, acknowledging the complexity of global issues, re-evaluating, oh, excuse me for that typo, global issues and connections as a part of everyday life, whether in a small or big way. Apologies, that quote got cut off. And finally, we have the OECD, who administers the PISA test, which is the benchmark for comparing national education systems around the world. As in 2018, the Global Competence Assessment for global citizenship measures students' capacity to examine local, global, and intercultural issues, to engage in open, appropriate, and effective interactions with people from different cultures, and to act for collective well-being and sustainable development. How do they do that? Well, they have these 4 global competence areas that you can see in the picture on the screen. Number 1 is examining local, global, and intercultural issues. So that knowledge base, understanding and appreciating perspectives and worldviews of others, engaging in open and appropriate and effective interactions across cultures, which is a global attitude, and the skills of taking action for collective well-being and sustainable development. So this, is kind of how we can start to conceptualize what global citizenship education is, and what we mean collectively at the international level when we're talking about how this is measured across national education systems. Excuse me. And so what can this look like? Conversations in classrooms about global citizenship can revolve around themes like economic justice, democracy and social movements, climate change and protecting the earth, race and racism, social and cultural diversity, issues of language, multiculturalism, immigration, refugee crisis. These are just some examples. Of course, the list goes on. And These themes can be discussed across different perspectives, of course, as with any issue. Researcher Matthew Hayes defines these 5 perspectives as sort of the main perspectives under which global citizenship and global citizenship education are most often framed. The first is a neoliberal perspective. This really sees global citizenship education as creating active participants in the global economy. So this often means promoting entrepreneurial spirit in students and really good communication skills to communicate across cultures, across nations. The second, nationalist, is what we sort of talked about in the beginning, this idea that citizenship education is focused on a country's citizenship as traditionally defined and really doesn't reach that global level. The third is an activist perspective. The activist perspective has clear directions and actions and frameworks for addressing what's wrong with the world. The fourth is a Western perspective. So this promotes perceptions of citizenship from the Western and global North perspective, not integrating any decolonial perspectives. So this is often, as I mentioned earlier, talking about things like tolerance, liberal democracies, etc. And the fifth, which I'll spend a lot of the rest of the time really diving into, is a critical perspective of global citizenship education. A critical perspective celebrates multiple ideas and perspectives of what a quote-unquote global citizen should be. It is necessarily not from a neutral perspective. A critical perspective, as many of you all are familiar, actively questions the world around us. So what does that mean in the terms of critical global citizenship education? We have here sort of 5 principles that a set of Canadian PhD researchers defined as principles for a critical global citizenship education. Number 1, to critically understand globalization and interrogate global hierarchical power relations. Number 2, to work with a broad and deep conception of citizenship learning. Number 3, adopting a caring, self-critical, and reflexive approach to how individuals, groups, and nations are implicated in local and global problems. Number 4, to engage in intercultural perspectives and diversity through critical literacy. And number 5, to use and enable citizen agency. So these are 5 perspectives, principles that Edu et al. are imploring us to think about as we think about what critical global citizenship looks like in the classroom. I would go one step further really to say that one of the easiest things we can do and the most important things, in my perspective, is to emphasize the connection between the global and the local when we're thinking about citizenship education. And I mean by that just connecting these idea of these global competencies that we've talked about with students' lived experience, with our own lived experience also as educators, whoever we might be in the classroom, in a place-based way that opens opportunity for dialogue and for taking action in our own community. Putting critical global citizenship education into practice then really emphasizes a learning in an interactive, practice-oriented, relationship-focused process that puts students and democratic principles and practices at the center. Talking about these things without talking about Brazil's own Paulo Freire would definitely leave out a lot of his legacy that has influenced so much of the citizenship and critical citizenship discourse and research, because Paulo Freire was so based in his local community. So much of what came out of his work in pedagogy of the oppressed and beyond really was focused on this idea of seeing ourselves as objects in our communities and having a problem posing education in order to find ways to transform our lives based in our own communities. I love this quote at the top. Não podemos entrar na luta como objetos para nos tornarmos sujeitos mais tarde. And this idea that global citizenship education requires that we all enter into discussions thinking about how we are affected from our own place that we are, because as Ferry noted, education is praxis, action and reflection of people upon the world to transform it. Some researchers at Arizona State University in the US, Daniel Shugorensky and Tara Bartlett, write that, while of course Freire wrote this in the context of Northeast Brazil in the mid-20th century, such a process of transformation can also take place in schools today, involving not just students and youth, but also teachers, non-teaching staff, parents, and community members, which I think is a really important point when we're thinking about what global citizenship on campus can look like. Shugorensky, moreover, writes about this idea of transformative citizenship learning as involving the nurturing and caring of caring and critical citizens who raise important questions and problems in overt ways, probe the status quo, and communicate without appealing to authority and tradition. So, after talking about all of that, what are some examples of how this can look, of connecting the local and global in ways that allow us to approach this idea of transformative citizenship learning? There are 3 examples that I want to share with you all today, and then we'll open up for question and answers, as well as please feel free to share any of your own ideas or experiences that you might have had of having the opportunity to connect your local place with global issues. But again, we'll go there in just a moment. So first, I'll talk about critical civic education from a participatory democracy perspective, then some examples of experiential learning, and a pedagogy called place as text or city as text. So first, from this idea of critical citizenship education, one example is participatory budgeting, which can be done in all different types of schools. Participatory budgeting started actually here in Brazil, Orçamento Participativo, in the early 90s in Porto Alegre, and now operates in a lot of different school settings, starting from elementary or basic school through the university level. At the university level, we have some really strong programs at the Universidad de Rosario in Argentina, as well as in Texas at Alamo College in San Antonio. Both of these processes have been going for over 10 years. And what happens in a participatory budgeting process is that part of the university budget is turned over to the community. The community does a process of identifying the needs and collecting ideas for how to use that budget, and then goes through a voting process and an implementation process of the winning ideas. It's really important to note that budget, the participatory budgeting portion of the whole university budget, is binding. Schools have to implement the ideas that the community votes on. And the researchers at Arizona State University I mentioned, Shugorensky and Bartlett, wrote that school participatory budgeting encompasses both the analysis of reality and the collective construction of solution-oriented actions, which are, of course, 2 phases of the education process that Freire conceptualized as dialectically related. So for Freire, the nurturing of citizenship requires transformative actions, connecting the subjective and objective dimensions of the development of consciousness, And participatory budgeting allows the opportunity to do this, to learn democracy by doing, to foster inclusive environments on campus and within the community, and to acquire habits of cooperation and self-governance by practicing these together. It's also really cool to note that, as you see in the image on the right, Alamo College has done an exchange with Kerala, India, I'm not sure how to say the name of that state. They have the biggest participatory budgeting process in India. And Alamo College has the biggest process in Texas and of any university in the US. So they have a process to figure out new ways of collaborating virtually, learning from the process in India and in Texas. So there's another kind of cool global level to the participatory budgeting that they do, and learning across borders from each other's experiences. We have the second example I wanted to bring up is the idea of cooperative education and how students can self-direct their own experiential education. By experiential education, I'm just referring to the process of learning by doing, the pedagogy of John Dewey, if anyone is familiar. We can try to, I hope this will work, watch a very short video where one of the faculty members gives a little more context to what this looks like at a small college in Ohio. Here we go.
For educating experientially, I would say that Antioch is at the top of our game in terms of bringing students not only experiential opportunities within their classes, all over campus. I would say our campus is really a learning laboratory. Students are engaged everywhere, from the farm to the studios at WYSO radio station. We see them out at the Japanese tea garden, over at the Foundry Theater doing their work there. We have students working at foundations, nonprofits, successful business and companies, and looking at what that feels like to be out in the world, being a part of a real team, making purposeful projects come to reality. So then when our students come back to campus, they're even more focused and decided upon how they're going to own their education moving forward towards that trajectory. Looking at their interests and then seeing how does that translate from a classroom into a professional organization. And I'd say the program is really interested in integrative learning, bringing an opportunity for the full person to find meaningful pathways during their time at Antioch as a student and beyond.
All right, so I wanted to show that video just to give a little bit of an example of how Antioch uses internships, what they call co-ops, but what are frequently taking place across campuses here. I know many students have several estagios, several internships that they complete throughout their course of study, and how we can think about those also as an opportunity to engage with these skills and knowledge and action of global citizenship education. Another example is this idea of city as text. So City as Text, originally a book written by James S. Duncan on the left, is used as a pedagogy to help students perform a sort of experiential field trip. The strategies of City as Text are just three: mapping, observing, and listening. Students in small groups go to somewhere, whether somewhere they're familiar with in their own community, or a new site, maybe even a new place in their own community, as in the story I'm going to share with you, to deeply observe what is going on in that community in order to break down barriers. or to quote, shatter the glassy stare of normal community-based learning, where we go on a field trip and we're looking as outside observers. We're not really, students might not really be thinking about some more critical questions, because they're just observing from a more superficial level. But what Citizenship texts ask students to do is really break down ideas that they might have preconceived notions about wherever place they're going to. So for example, Little Haiti is a community in Miami, in Florida in the US, that has a large Haitian population. And Little Haiti is often, it's an underfunded community, and often people will just go to the market that you see on the picture, on one of the main avenue of the city, but otherwise avoid Little Haiti for ideas that it's maybe dangerous, etc. Parents tell their children, you know, don't go through Little Haiti, etc., etc. But Miami suffers from a lot of segregation in the community. So what this professor at Florida International University did was learn the Citizenship text method, and through some trial and errors, have these field trips where students went to, through foreign language learning, through a French class, because they speak Haitian Creole in a lot of places in Little Haiti, go to the community, look around, as with the context, the pretext that they're practicing French, but really to have conversations and break down a lot of the preconceived notions that they had about Little Haiti as a neighborhood, about the neighbors, and build relationships with folks that they met across the time there. And then importantly, have a dialogue afterwards to discuss what they all learned, and really see that through the different small groups that broke up and did this activity, they could share at the end what they learned. And also that they, you know, saw different things, learned different things, really lean into their multiple perspectives. And so now I would love, these are just some of the folks that I referenced here. Professor Makines is the person that wrote Little Haiti's text. Some of the other references I used here. But I'd love to just discuss a little bit if you'd like to put your questions in the chat, or raise your hand, come off mute, have some time for discussion.